Sarah wiped down the same table for the third time, her hands trembling slightly as she watched the black SUVs pull into the parking lot of Rosie's diner. The small town of Cedar Falls had seen maybe 2 fancy cars in the past year, and now 3 military vehicles sat outside her workplace like sleeping beasts. She tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she'd developed over the past 5 years of hiding in this forgotten corner of Montana. The bell above the door chimed as 4 men walked in, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere of the cozy diner. They moved with the kind of confidence that came from years of training, their eyes scanning the room in a way that made Sarah's blood run cold. She recognized the look. It was the same way she used to survey a room before a mission, back when she had a different name and a very different life. "Table for 4?" Sarah asked, forcing her voice to remain steady as she grabbed menus from behind the counter. The leader of the group, a tall man with steel-gray eyes, nodded and followed her to a corner booth. As they settled in, Sarah couldn't help but notice how they positioned themselves with clear views of all exits. These weren't ordinary soldiers on leave. "What can I get you gentlemen to drink?" she asked, pulling out her order pad with practiced ease. The gray-eyed man, whose name tag read Lieutenant Commander Hayes, looked up at her with an intensity that made her want to run. "Coffee all around," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to giving orders. "And maybe you could help us with something else. We're looking for someone who might have passed through here a few years back." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her expression neutral. "This is a small town, sir. Most folks who come through here are just passing by on their way to somewhere else. What's this person look like?" Hayes reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph. Sarah's world tilted as she stared at her own face, but not as she was now. In the photo, her hair was dark brown, cut in a sharp bob, and her eyes held a hardness that 5 years of small-town life had softened. She was wearing military fatigues, standing next to equipment she'd hoped never to see again. "Her name was Lieutenant Alexandra Reed," Hayes said, watching Sarah's face carefully. "Specialized in explosive ordnance disposal and deep cover operations. She disappeared 5 years ago after a mission in Afghanistan went sideways." Sarah set down the coffee pot she'd been holding, buying herself a moment to think. "I'm sorry, but I don't recognize her. Like I said, we get a lot of people passing through. I'll get your coffee now." As she walked back to the counter, Sarah's mind raced. She'd been Alexandra Reed once, one of the military's most skilled demolitions experts. She'd been part of a black ops team that officially didn't exist, conducting missions that would never appear in any government report. The mission Hayes mentioned, the one in Afghanistan, had been her last. She'd uncovered something she wasn't supposed to see, something that made powerful people very nervous. The memory hit her like a physical blow. She'd been deep undercover in a Taliban stronghold, gathering intelligence on their weapons cache when she'd discovered that some of those weapons had American serial numbers, not weapons that had been stolen or captured, weapons that had been sold to the enemy by someone high up in the military hierarchy. When she'd tried to report her findings, her commanding officer had told her to forget what she'd seen and focus on the mission. But Alexandra Reed had never been good at following orders she disagreed with. She'd gathered evidence, documented everything, and planned to take it to military intelligence when she returned to base. She never got the chance. The compound had been bombed the night before the extraction, with her supposedly inside. Only her quick thinking and years of training had kept her alive as she'd escaped through a tunnel system she'd mapped during her reconnaissance. Back in the present, Sarah poured 4 cups of coffee, her hands steady despite the chaos in her mind. She'd spent 5 years building this new life, 5 years believing she was safe in this small town where nobody asked too many questions about her past. She'd gotten comfortable, maybe too comfortable. When she returned to the table with the coffee, the 4 SEALs were studying a map of the local area. Hayes looked up as she approached, his gray eyes seeming to see right through her carefully constructed facade. "You know," he said conversationally, "Alexandra Reed was known for being incredibly observant. She could spot danger from miles away, could disappear into any environment and become someone else entirely. The kind of skills that would serve someone well if they needed to start a new life." Sarah's hand didn't shake as she set down the coffee cups, though inside she was screaming. "Sounds like quite a woman," she said. "What happened to her?" "That's what we're trying to figure out," said one of the other SEALs, a younger man with a scar running down his left cheek. "See, some new information has come to light about that mission in Afghanistan. Turns out she was right about what she found. Someone very high up in the chain of command was selling weapons to our enemies, and when she got too close to the truth, they tried to eliminate her." The room seemed to spin around Sarah. If they knew she'd been right, if they'd come looking for her, it could only mean one thing. They needed her testimony to bring down whoever had been behind the weapons sales. But it could also mean that the people who'd tried to kill her 5 years ago had found out she was still alive. "The thing is," Hayes continued, his voice dropping lower, "we think she survived. And if she did, her life is in immediate danger. The people who tried to kill her then have realized she might still be alive, and they're sending a cleanup crew to finish the job." Sarah felt the color drain from her face. "When?" she whispered, forgetting for a moment to maintain her cover. Hayes's eyes sharpened. 3 hours ago, we intercepted communications indicating that a team of mercenaries was being dispatched to Cedar Falls. They have her current identity, her location, everything. If Alexandra Reed is still alive, she has maybe 6 hours before they arrive." The coffee cup slipped from Sarah's numb fingers, crashing to the floor in a spray of ceramic and hot liquid. 6 hours. After 5 years of safety, she had 6 hours before her past caught up with her, 6 hours to decide whether to run again or finally face the demons she'd been hiding from. "Miss, are you all right?" Hayes asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Sarah looked around the diner, at the familiar red vinyl booths, the pie case she'd restocked that morning, the photos of local high school football teams covering the walls. This had been her sanctuary, her chance at a normal life. But normal was a luxury she'd never really been able to afford. She straightened up, and for the first time in 5 years, Lieutenant Alexandra Reed looked out through Sarah Thompson's eyes. "I think," she said quietly, "we need to talk." Hayes signaled to his team, and they quickly moved to secure the diner. One SEAL flipped the sign to closed and locked the front door, while another checked the back exit. The remaining team member positioned himself near the windows, keeping watch on the parking lot. In less than 30 seconds, Rosie's diner had become a tactical command center. Sarah Thompson, age 28, moved to Cedar Falls 5 years ago with excellent references from a diner in Wyoming that burned down shortly after she left, Hayes recited from memory. "No family, keeps to herself, but friendly with the locals, pays her rent in cash, drives a 10-year-old Honda Civic, and volunteers at the local animal shelter on weekends. Sounds like the perfect cover identity for someone with your skills." Sarah, Alexandra, sank into the booth across from Hayes, her cover completely blown. "How long have you known?" "We've been tracking possibilities for 6 months, Hayes admitted. "When the investigation into the weapons trafficking finally got approved, your name came up as the only surviving witness. We've been checking every Sarah, every Alexandra, every woman in the right age range who appeared out of nowhere around the time you disappeared." "And what made you certain it was me?" The SEAL with the scarred cheek looked up from his position by the window. "Your reaction time when I mentioned the 6-hour timeline. Civilians panic or ask questions. Trained operatives immediately want to know when and start calculating escape routes. You went straight to tactical thinking." Alexandra rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of 5 years of careful deception crumbling around her. "Who's coming for me?" Blackwater contractors, off the books, Hayes replied grimly. Four-man team led by Marcus Vaughn. You might remember him, former Delta Force, went private after some questionable incidents in Iraq. Word is he's been cleaning up loose ends for a certain Pentagon official for the past few years. The name hit Alexandra like a physical blow. She'd worked with Vaughn twice in Afghanistan, and both times she'd gotten the distinct impression that he enjoyed the violent aspects of their missions a little too much. If they'd sent him, it meant they weren't taking any chances this time. How much does the Pentagon know about what I found? Alexandra asked. Everything, Hayes said. The investigation broke open 3 weeks ago when another whistleblower came forward with similar evidence. Turns out the weapons sales to the Taliban were just part of a larger operation. Someone's been funding terrorist organizations across the Middle East and Central Asia, using the profits to finance black ops missions that Congress never approved. Alexandra felt sick. She'd known what she'd discovered was bad, but she'd had no idea of the scope. Who's behind it? That's where we need your testimony. The evidence we have points to several high-ranking officials, but without your original documentation and witness testimony, we can't prove which one was running the operation. You were the only person on the ground who saw the whole picture. The sound of vehicles pulling into the parking lot made everyone freeze. Hayes held up his hand for silence as they listened to the low rumble of engines and the slam of car doors. Through the window, they could see 3 black SUVs, not military vehicles this time, but the kind of anonymous rental cars that contractors preferred. They're early, muttered the SEAL by the window. Looks like 8 men, full tactical gear. Alexandra's mind shifted into combat mode, the skills she'd kept buried for 5 years surging back to the surface. This building has 2 exits, front door and kitchen back door. There's a basement access through the pantry, but it only leads to the old storm cellar. No other way out. Windows? Hayes asked, already knowing the answer but checking anyway. Kitchen window is too small and the dining room windows face the parking lot where they are. We're effectively trapped unless we fight our way out. Hayes was already pulling equipment from a duffel bag one of his men had brought in. Good thing we came prepared. Sarah, do you have anything useful stashed in this place? Alexandra almost smiled despite their dire situation. You think I'd survive 5 years without a backup plan? She moved quickly to the coffee machine, reaching underneath to retrieve a small weapons cache she'd hidden there years ago. 2 pistols, extra ammunition, a tactical knife, and a small explosive device that could level half the building if necessary. Old habits, she explained, checking the weapons with practiced efficiency. I've got similar stashes at my apartment and 3 other locations around town. Always figured this day might come. The front door rattled as someone tested the lock. Through the window, they could see Vaughn himself studying the diner, his cold eyes taking in every detail. He was older now, his hair gone gray, but he still moved with the deadly grace of a predator. Sarah Thompson, Vaughn called out, his voice carrying easily through the glass. We know you're in there. This doesn't have to end badly for anyone. We just want to talk. Alexandra snorted. Right, talk. I've seen his version of conversation before. Hayes was coordinating with his team through hand signals, positioning them for maximum defensive coverage. How well do you know the surrounding area? Like the back of my hand. I've walked every street in this town, memorized every building, every alley. There's a network of old mining tunnels that runs under half the town, including right under this diner. But the entrance is in the basement of the hardware store next door. How far? 20 yards through an open parking lot. Might as well be 20 miles with 8 trained killers watching every move. The sound of breaking glass from the kitchen made them all spin around. Vaughn's team was moving faster than expected, probably using the conversation as a distraction while they positioned for a multi-point breach. They're coming in the back, Hayes said into his radio. Rodriguez, Martinez, cover the kitchen. Williams, take the front. Reed, Stay low and try to reach that basement access you mentioned. Alexandra shook her head. I'm not running anymore. These people have been hunting me for 5 years, and it ends here. This isn't about heroics, Hayes snapped. If you die here, the people responsible for the weapons trafficking walk free. Your testimony is the only thing that can bring them down. Then we'd better make sure I survive, Alexandra replied, chambering a round in her pistol. The familiar weight of the weapon in her hands was like greeting an old friend. Deadly, but reliable. The kitchen door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and smoke. Rodriguez and Martinez opened fire immediately, their weapons chattering in the confined space. Shouts and return fire filled the air as Vaughn's team pushed into the building. At the same moment, the front windows shattered as more mercenaries rappelled down from the roof, coming through the dining room like dark angels of death. Williams dove behind the counter, laying down covering fire as Hayes and Alexandra took positions behind overturned tables. So much for the peaceful approach, Alexandra muttered, putting 2 rounds center mass into the first mercenary through the window. The man dropped hard, his tactical vest stopping the bullets but not the kinetic force that knocked him unconscious. The diner erupted into chaos. Bullets chewed through vinyl booth seats and shattered coffee cups as both sides fought for position. The smell of gunpowder mixed with the aroma of fresh coffee and pie, creating a surreal battlefield in what had been Alexandra's sanctuary just minutes before. Through the gunfire, she could hear Vaughn shouting orders to his team. He was coordinating a pincer movement, trying to trap them in a crossfire between the kitchen and dining room entrances. It was a solid tactic, but it relied on his targets being ordinary people who would panic under pressure. He'd forgotten who he was really fighting. Alexandra caught Hayes's eye across the chaos and pointed toward the kitchen. She held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. On her signal, they both moved, laying down covering fire as they fought their way toward the back of the diner and the basement access that might be their only way out. But as they reached the kitchen doorway, Alexandra saw something that made her blood run cold. One of Vaughn's men was setting up what looked like an incendiary device against the back wall. They weren't just trying to capture her. They were planning to burn down the entire building with everyone inside. The evidence would point to a gas leak explosion, just another tragic accident in a small town, and the only person who could testify against the weapons trafficking conspiracy would be dead, along with the Navy SEALs who'd come to protect her. Alexandra realized that this wasn't just about her anymore. This was about justice, about holding powerful people accountable for their crimes. And she was the only one who could make that happen. Time to stop running and start fighting back. Alexandra's training kicked in with crystal clarity. She'd spent years learning to think 3 steps ahead, and right now those skills might save all their lives. The incendiary device would take 2 minutes to activate once armed. She could see the timer from her position. That gave them a narrow window to turn the tables on Vaughn's team. "Hayes," she whispered urgently, "I need you to trust me. In 30 seconds, I'm going to create a diversion that will draw most of their fire. When I do, get your team to that basement entrance. Don't wait for me." "Like hell we're leaving you behind," Hayes replied, reloading his weapon with practiced speed. "You're not leaving me behind. I'm going hunting." Alexandra's voice carried a cold determination that Hayes recognized from veteran soldiers who'd reached their breaking point. "There are innocent people in this town who don't deserve to get caught in this crossfire. I'm ending this now." Before Hayes could stop her, Alexandra was moving. She grabbed the small explosive device from her cache, a flashbang grenade she'd modified years ago, and pulled the pin. Instead of throwing it at the mercenaries, she tossed it toward the front of the diner, where it would create maximum confusion without bringing down the building. The explosion lit up the dining room like a miniature sun, followed by a concussive blast that shattered every remaining window. In the chaos that followed, Alexandra moved like a ghost, using the smoke and confusion to get behind Vaughn's positions. The first mercenary never saw her coming. She dropped him with a silent takedown, liberated his tactical radio, and listened to Vaughn coordinating his team's response to the explosion. His voice was calm, professional, but she could hear the frustration underneath. Things weren't going according to his plan. "Team 2, report!" Vaughn's voice crackled through the radio. Alexandra keyed the microphone, modulating her voice to sound like one of his men. "Team 2 is down. Multiple casualties. The targets have explosives." She could practically hear Vaughn's teeth grinding. "Fall back to secondary positions. We'll flush them out with the incendiary." Through the smoke, Alexandra saw Hayes and his team reaching the basement entrance. Good. They'd be safe from what was coming next. She moved toward the kitchen where she could see the mercenary with the incendiary device making final adjustments to the timer. The man was focused on his work, confident that his team had the situation under control. Alexandra approached from his blind spot, the tactical knife from her cache ready in her hand. She'd done this before, in darker places under worse circumstances, but it never got easier. "Marcus always was too confident," she whispered as she neutralized the threat. Disarming the incendiary device with 15 seconds to spare. The timer showed 00:15, 0:14, 0:13. Alexandra's fingers flew over the device, her explosive ordnance training coming back like muscle memory. 0:03, 0:02, 0:0. The device went dark. "What the hell was that?" Vaughn's voice echoed through the kitchen. "That was me saying hello, Marcus." Alexandra stepped into the dining room, her weapon trained on the man who'd been hunting her for 5 years. 3 of his mercenaries flanked him, but their positions were defensive now, uncertain. Vaughn smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Alexandra Reed, you look good for a dead woman. Disappointed I survived your little bombing in Afghanistan?" "Ancient history," Vaughn replied, though his grip tightened on his weapon. "You've caused a lot of important people a lot of problems. Time to clean up the mess." "The only mess here is the corruption you've been covering up. How many people have you killed to protect whoever's behind the weapons sales?" Vaughn's expression didn't change. "Enough. And I'll kill as many more as necessary. That's what professionals do. We finish the job." Alexandra noticed one of his mercenaries shifting position, trying to get a better angle. She adjusted her aim slightly, keeping all 4 men in her sight picture. "Here's the problem, Marcus. I'm not the scared little witness you've been hunting anymore. I've had 5 years to prepare for this moment." "You think you can take all 4 of us?" One of the mercenaries laughed. "I don't think anything," Alexandra replied. "I know exactly what I can do." The standoff stretched for seconds that felt like hours. Through the broken windows, Alexandra could hear sirens in the distance. Someone in town had called the police about the gunfire. Vaughn heard them too, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. He was running out of time. "Last chance, Reed," he said. "Come with us quietly, and maybe the people in this town don't get hurt when we have to come back and finish this properly." "There won't be a next time," Alexandra said quietly. "Because you're not leaving here." Vaughn's expression shifted to surprise, then anger. "You always were too righteous for this business. That's why you had to—" He never finished the sentence. Alexandra moved first, diving left as she fired 2 rounds center mass. Vaughn's tactical vest absorbed the impact, but the force knocked him backward into his men. In the confusion, Alexandra rolled behind the counter as return fire chewed up the space where she'd been standing. But she wasn't there anymore. Years of small-town waitressing had taught her every inch of the diner's layout, every hiding spot, every angle. She moved through her former workplace like it was an extension of her body, using furniture and fixtures for cover as she systematically eliminated Vaughn's remaining team. The second mercenary went down when he tried to flank her position. The third made the mistake of assuming the small woman couldn't possibly be as dangerous as advertised. By the time Vaughn realized he was alone, Alexandra had him surrounded by his own dead teammates. "It's over, Marcus," she said, emerging from cover with her weapon trained on his head. "Drop your gun and get on your knees," Vaughn laughed bitterly. "You think this ends here? You think killing me solves anything? There are a dozen more contractors ready to take this job, and 100 more like me. The people I work for have resources you can't imagine." "Maybe," Alexandra admitted, "but you won't be around to see what happens next." "Wait," Vaughn said quickly, as he saw her finger tighten on the trigger. "You want the man behind all this? The one who ordered the weapons sales, who's been funding terrorist operations for the past decade? I can give him to you." Alexandra paused. "Talk." "General Morrison. Pentagon brass, 3 stars, complete access to military intelligence and Black Ops funding. He's been running this operation since 2018, using the profits to fund off-the-books missions in Syria, Pakistan, Yemen. The weapons to the Taliban were just the beginning. The name hit Alexandra like a physical blow. General Morrison had been her commanding officer's superior, the man who'd signed off on her missions in Afghanistan. She'd met him twice, remembered thinking he was everything a military leader should be: dedicated, principled, patriotic. "You're lying," she said, but even as she spoke, pieces were falling into place. Morrison would have had access to her mission reports, would have known what she'd discovered. He could have ordered the bombing that was supposed to kill her. "Check my phone," Vaughn said desperately. "Last message received. It's from him, confirming this operation." Alexandria kept her weapon trained on Vaughn as she reached for his phone with her free hand. The screen showed a text message from a blocked number, sent just 3 hours ago. "Package located. Cleanup operation authorized. No survivors." It was signed with Morrison's military call sign, something only someone with intimate knowledge of special operations would know. The sirens were getting closer now, and Alexandra could hear Hayes calling her name from the basement. Local police would be here soon, followed by federal agents and probably more military personnel. If Morrison was as connected as Vaughn claimed, there was no telling who might be working for him. "Here's what's going to happen," Alexandra said, making a decision that would change everything. "You're going to call General Morrison and tell him the operation was successful. Tell him Alexandra Reed is dead, along with the Navy SEALs who found her. Buy me time to get the evidence to people I trust." "And if I refuse?" Alexandra smiled, and for the first time in 5 years, it was the cold, dangerous smile of Lieutenant Alexandra Reed. "Then you don't leave this diner alive. Your choice." Vaughn looked around at his dead teammates, at the destruction surrounding them, at the woman who'd just systematically dismantled his entire operation. 5 years ago, he'd underestimated her. He wasn't making that mistake again. "Morrison won't believe I completed the mission without proof," he said. "Then you'd better be convincing." As Vaughn reached for his phone with shaking hands, Alexandra realized that her 5-year exile was finally over. Sarah Thompson, the waitress, was dead, killed in the crossfire of someone else's war. But Lieutenant Alexandra Reed, the woman who'd always refused to look the other way when good people were in danger, was very much alive, and she had a job to finish.